Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Anant Bhan. I'm a member of the steering committee and I've been asked to do a quick summary of the Global Forum for Bioethics and Research 2023. Of course, I'm not going to do a summary again. We had an excellent one in the morning. And also, of course, all of you have been very attentive today, so I don't think you need a summary again of today's discussions, but just some thoughts for you to maybe reflect, yeah? So, of course, one of the things we talked about was that you cannot design a fair process without a conception of a just outcome. And one way of looking at outcome might be what is being reflected in terms of research outputs, right? So around the time GFBR started at the end of the century, there was this analysis published by Sumatipala et al., which looked at underrepresentation of LMICs in research literature. And their analysis showed around 6.5% actual output coming in from the rest of the world. There were 4 categories that they had. So the closest to perhaps LMICs was the rest of the world. So 6.5%. Now, almost 20 years later, the difference is not starkly different. Even in a specialty journal, which is Lancet Global Health, you would see the bulk of articles are actually still coming in from academics from high-income countries and not from the context in where the research is happening. And of course, this analysis, which was just published in PNAS Social Sciences, talks about racism also as something to look at, and the fact that representation is still a challenge, especially in editorial boards. And what does that translate to? Longer review times, lesser representation in leadership positions, and even within high-income country context, specifically the US, they found that Black and Hispanic scientists received significantly lesser citations compared to whiter ones doing similar research, right? So something for us to think about in that context as well. Now, of course, we should not always only problematize. What are solutions that we could look at? One solution has been a journal that some of you might be aware of, PLOS Global Public Health, conflict of interest. I'm a section editor with the journal, but there we've tried to do things a little bit differently in terms of how representation is ensured. So there's a lot of editors coming in from LMIC contexts. Many of them are BIPOC. The review process is done in a way that is respectful. There are article processing charges, but those are liberally waived off. Paywall issues have been addressed, etc. Right? So there might be solutions which we should be looking at. Unfortunately, even if research is prioritized, now we are talking about the research process per itself. What is the kind of research which is happening? Now, of course, we look at health research because that's what we are most familiar with. But similar to health research, you have research happening in disciplines such as developmental economics, right? So this was one research which was done in Kenya. Some of you who are from Kenya and Africa might know of this. This was done with funding from World Bank, no surprise perhaps there, where economists decided that let's run a randomized control trial to try to figure out a solution to people not paying their water bills on time. And so what should we do for that? Let's randomize people into cutting off their water supply and having a control, which is not cutting off their water supply. And of course, unsurprisingly, if you cut off people's water supply, they pay their bills on time, right? So here is a policy solution. Cut off people's supply to get them to pay your bills. But not talking about the fact that water supply was erratic, water supply was often not coming, and that's why people were not paying their bills. But if this is the kind of policy research which is happening, which impacts people's lives on the ground, then we should also worry about what does priority setting lead to, right? What are the kind of questions which are then entertained? Some of our own work, we've been trying to interrogate who gets to participate in research and not. So this is a study which we did with funding from Sabin Vaccine Institute. We tried to understand during COVID-19 how are marginalized communities, specifically trans queer communities and persons with disability in India, able to access COVID vaccination or not, and how could that be used to inform the vaccination program, right? So what we found was, of course, COVID vaccine trials did not look at many of these marginalized communities. There was no evidence available about the impact of the vaccine on these communities. Many of them were on SRS, they were on hormonal replacement therapy, they were undergoing transition. In the absence of that evidence, many of them were reluctant to take the vaccine. And these were individuals and or communities who were very quickly labeled as being vaccine hesitant, right? And the problem was shifted onto them. These are the communities who are problematic, they are the ones who are hesitant, they are the ones not leading us into a place where we would have high vaccination coverage. And similarly, this was also the case with persons with disability, where again, because they had multiple comorbidities, they had concerns about taking the vaccine, not taking the vaccine, what would that mean for them, especially if they had other conditions. Again, no evidence being available, hence finding it difficult, right? So as we have seen over the last 3 days, I'm including the satellite meeting which happened a day earlier before the 2 days that we met all together. Policy development to implementation of ethical priority setting is something that we need to think about. Also think about the fact that even if we identify questions during health research priority setting exercises, how many of them lead to actual research studies happening on the ground, and more importantly, actually leading to some kind of a perceptible difference for communities as they engage with their daily struggles, right? Issues around corruption were brought up. In terms of reciprocity, if we engage with communities, we had a lot of discussion yesterday as well around how do we engage with communities, especially those who've been at the margins. But if you engage with them and you ask them, let's prioritize, let's go through extensive exercises, we will support you, we will give you an incentive. But at the end of the day, you have a list, and what do you do with the list? If you don't then end up going and doing research studies in that area, have you failed them, right? Is it ethical to engage with them, get something as an input from, and then not respond to that? And especially in terms of lived experience, it was great, I think, to also see lived experience in this forum in terms of representation. I was very glad to see persons with disability, persons with lived experience of mental health, their contributions are very much valued. In fact, the last GFBR I attended, some of you will know, I had a foot injury during the GFBR. I went back home, I underwent a surgery, and I was temporarily disabled for 3 to 4 months, right? And at that point of time, it was quite something to be on the other side. That was my perhaps first lived experience as a patient, what it means to be admitted, what it means to be on an operation table, and that at that point of time, be asked to sign a consent form. What does it mean post-op to be woken up every 3 hours because someone very bureaucratically has to put up your heart rate, has to put up your blood pressure, has to take your temperature, with no regard for the fact that you're trying to get some rest, you're in acute pain, etc., right? So, of course, one doesn't need to be a patient to try to understand, but that's where lived experience matters. And the idiom from the disability community, which is nothing about us without us, hence becomes extremely important, and we should certainly keep that in mind in our discussions. So again, I think over the last couple of days, we've talked about how do we infuse justice, equity, accountability, and transparency lenses in the work that we do. How do we recognize the complexity of health decision-making? How do we localize some of this decision-making through making sure that capacity building and resources are available? How does this interface with donor-driven agendas, where donors sometimes decide 10-year strategy, 15-year strategy in advance, and they've already decided what they want to spend their money on? How much of research funds, even if they are decided in terms of priority setting exercise, are actually spent on research, right? I know of several government programs in India where the bulk of research funds go in actually paying the salaries of the research managers, in buying equipment, in setting up infrastructure, but not actually in doing research, right? So that's also a challenge. And also recognize the toll of expectations, because this is another set of lenses of expectations that we have on researchers, that you should be engaging through extensive health research priority setting exercises, but who does that onus fall down to? Should it be primarily researchers? Does a larger community need to be engaged? So something for us to think about. And how do we ensure democratic access to opportunities, given there are some superstars in all of our countries, including LMICs, who seem to be taking the lion's share of funding? Is there publicly available information about funding opportunities, who's getting the funding, what is funding happening, what are the future opportunities, who's gotten it in the past, etc. How do we expand the pie, right? So yesterday, Joe was talking about the pie, but should we be happy about the fact that there is a limited amount of funds available for research? Should we not also be talking about expanding the amount of funding which is available for health broadly, but also specifically for health research? What kind of fair processes can we talk about so that we can have meaningful inclusion of stakeholders, and of course language? So we were talking about language earlier today in terms of moving from marginalized communities to equity demanding to equity deserving. Similarly, in the global literature, including in the UN literature, you will see a lot of talk about benefits, and we talk about benefit sharing in ethics as well. But it's one thing to talk about benefits as some kind of an expectation of doing good versus something which is an entitlement. I believe citizens, I believe that individuals who are engaged with the research endeavors should also talk about their entitlements from the engagement that they bring to the research process. And maybe that's another part of language that we need to talk about. Okay, so something to end the presentation with. As I was coming in, walking in, there's this very interesting sort of collection of, if we were to imagine, what kind of animals would social sector folks be? Donors could be individuals who trust no one. So how do we build trust, especially with funders? who have, who have control over funding, bureaucrats, policymakers, right? Who, how do we move them to actually respond to these conversations? Because, we can have all the very intense conversations, but ultimately, policymakers have to look. Community resource persons, the communities that we engage with. Of course, we put them through these extensive exercises, but are they able to respond, Poor folks sometimes. Researchers, at the end of the day, are we clever squirrels? And we find out places to hide nuts, except there are no nuts, right? So something to think about. Or just to also highlight that just yesterday, we've just launched the new guidelines on responsible research institutions and good governance practices. There are some discussions around resources and resource allocations. This might be of interest. This is freely downloadable from SIOM's website. And of course, most importantly, we are very, very hopeful, and we expect that these 2 days of conversations would have left you with a lot of thoughts and thinking about how to take these conversations forward in your own national context, subnational context, regional context. And so please do look out for the opportunities through the fellowships, through the process of refining the GFBR. We've thought of these ways of continuous engagement, and we are very hopeful that many of you will apply for the fellowships. Thank you so much for your attention, and safe travels. And can I now invite TC to end the day?
Hello everyone, good afternoon. So I'm going to try to raise your dopamine level by making some fun and exciting announcements, because I'm the fun and exciting guy on the steering committee member. My name is Teck Chuan, or you can call me TC, from Singapore. I'm going to make some people very happy first by announcing the winners of the Petra Kucha and the thematic presentations. All the presentations were fantastic, very clear, high quality, but we can only have some winners, right? I don't know what's the substantive criteria, Joe, but it's based on your votes, so I think that's a fair process at least. So I'm going to announce the runner-up of the Petra Kucha first. Drum roll, please. Thanks. Okay, runner-up for the Petra Kucha. Strategy of engagement, a model for prioritizing research in mental health. Ilana Romero. Great. Best Petra Kucha, conducting high priority research in over-researched communities in Pakistan. The article burden, Shahila Siddiq.
This goes in the newsletter. Congratulations. You got all the top.
Okay, it's going to be a surprise thing for the next runner-up for the thematic, because we have two winners for the, two runner-ups. This feels like an Oscar moment when I make a folly. Okay. Two runner-ups for the thematic presentations, right? Okay, because they got equal scores. Remember, it's based on votes, right? Pure votes. Okay, not in any order. The first runner-up is, they are equal, okay? Health research priority setting experiences from Uganda, Tanzania, and Zambia. Lydia Kapirili. Okay. The equal runner-up, oops. Decentralized priorities for central schemes experience of Department of Health Research prioritization exercise for the model rural health research units across India, J.R. Singh. Now, because it was a surprise that we got equal scores and we needed two presents, Yeah. And yeah, because we only bought one prize. But we can still take pictures. Okay, so they'll both receive their prizes at the satellite meeting tomorrow. Okay, best thematic presentation. Drum roll. Ethical challenges and improvement pathways, a case study on health research priority setting in the Philippines. Joseph.
I hope it's okay if we both win. But he'll get the prize definitely.
Okay, right, so. Now for the very exciting announcement of the next GFBR topic. Okay, this is going to excite us who are addicts of the GFBR. I hope you guys come back and join us. Also to sort of promote this meeting to all your colleagues. The next year's topic is very exciting, very topical. It affects us all. The topic is climate change and health research ethics. That is the working title. Okay. Just to let you know, we haven't decided on the location yet, but look out for the announcement on the website. Okay, so I think that concludes. Catherine, any words? That's it. Okay, enjoy your day out, your flight back, or your meeting tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.